Hello everyone, welcome to Unit 5. So as promised, we're going to hit and go over personality disorders again. Learning objectives, and this will cover chapter 30 in your textbook. So the continuum of social responses, just like in everything else we've talked about, everything is on a continuum in psychiatry, right? Between mental health and mental illness, you can fall anywhere in between. So just like with personality and social responses, some people have adaptive and some people have maladaptive personalities. So the personality is a composite of behavioral traits and attitudes that identify one as an individual. What makes you you? The unique pattern, thoughts, attitudes, values, behaviors that every human develops. Highly functional people are going to move along the continuum, balancing out what happens, right? Their needs for intimacy, needs for solitude. Individuals with personality problems are going to struggle to define and meet their social needs. Important things to remember. Can personality traits change over time? Yes, they can. Drastic changes are what we want to be concerned about, especially in the elderly. There is no magic pill for personality disorder, right? This is going to be hard as we talk about it because the treatment's psychotherapy. We do use some medications, which we'll talk about at the end, but those are going to be for coexisting conditions. These are higher functioning individuals compared to what we're going to talk about in other lectures, and they really are just struggling to have their social needs met. In the life cycle, childhood, right? Go back to Erik Erikson, trust versus mistrust. The infant's need for food, when everything's being met, they develop trust and self-worth. If their needs are not being met, that leads to struggles in the development of personality. Toddlers develop object constancy. So they know that when you leave their sight, you still exist. Morality is a big one when we get to some of these personality disorders, especially antisocial, right? Morality starts to develop between 6 and 10. And that's, letting the kid know, the person know. If I go and steal this person's video game system, their Switch, it's going to hurt their feelings and they might cry. So I'm not going to steal their video games. Adolescents, usually by now, the personality is well established. Adolescents assert their independence from their parents. Big struggles at this time, right? They're categorized into peer groups. You have the jocks, you have the nerds, you have the tough guys. It's a whole breakfast club group, right? They're going to get in where they fit in, but the main goal in adolescence is usually independence. Personality is mostly developed. What you like, what you do, things are going to change. I didn't like sushi as a teenager. I like sushi now as an adult, but for the most part, I'm still the same person. There could be significant events that happen that change a personality, and that can happen too. By adulthood, most adults are self-sufficient. We're involved in relationships, we make occupational choices, we start families, we grow self-awareness, and we're sensitive to and accepting the feelings of others. And I apologize if you can hear my circus around me. I'm trying to hide from everyone, but it is a snow day. My kids are all home, and there's a Mario Kart tournament going on in the living room. Right? So in adulthood, we're adults. We start to have a more better sense of who we are, and we're starting our own families. In middle adulthood, right? So in middle adulthood, it's important. They're comfortable with themselves. They're comfortable with their relationships. They can encourage independence with others. You grow and evolve your friendships, experiencing changes, demands in the time. It's adjusting, but it's mostly constant, right? Because remember, by this middle adulthood, by older adulthood, any major changes in the personality, we're going to be concerned. Phineas Gage is his name. He got a metal rod through his head, and it completely changed his personality. So drastic changes in personalities by this middle adult, older adulthood, we want to be looking out for what is the underlying cause. So older adults must cope with loss and change, right? People around you just die as you get older. It happens. The strength of personality is going to carry them through. And again, like I said, don't assume a personality change is normal, right? You have someone who's always been active and now they undergo dialysis. or an elderly individual who's been in an accident and now they are paralyzed from the waist down, right? We need to be double check that if we're looking at an older adult and there's a personality change, that something else is going on. Biological theories, nature versus nurture. This is the nature. One's temperament is genetically linked. Biologic, twins, right? One might be different. One cries and cries and the other is fine and never cries. Abnormalities in neurotransmitters can cause personality disorders, and brain mechanisms that connect with emotions with intellect may be missing. Maybe in an intellectual disorder. Psychoanalytic is your nurture. Psychoanalytic is that good versus bad. Something happened when you were an infant, and that helped develop your personality to how it is now. Freud, this is Freud, right? He always goes back to the mother. If the mother responds in a way that causes frustration, the child is going to have difficulty finding that proper fit. Especially maternal behavior when it comes to Freud is going to influence these personality disorders in that psychoanalytic theories. Behavioral theories. Behavior is learned, and focus should only be on observable behavior, right? This is that classic conditioning, that operant conditioning, Pavlov and his dogs. So things happen, we learn responses based on past events, and that is what makes us who we are. It could be Erikson. You could have unmet needs during a previous developmental period. So in infancy, trust versus mistrust, you were not provided what you were needed as an infant. You lean towards mistrust, and that affects your personality moving forward. Social culture. Everyone's personality is going to be different based on their culture. Gender is a huge cultural role. I grew up in an old-fashioned Northeast family, and if I was there today and it was snowing, all the women would be outside shoveling snow because the men could have a heart attack because they have increased heart attacks in snow. That's ingrained in my culture, right? My husband can't go outside and do anything today because if he does in this ice storm, he could have a heart attack and die. Foundation of personality disorders is built on society, social, and cultural stresses. Females see a lot of it, unfortunately. Women are more likely to have depression, and schizophrenia occurs more frequently in lower socioeconomic classes. So what is a personality disorder? Long-standing maladaptive behaviors, patterns of behavior and relating. Something happened, right? And now you are maladaptive. You are functionally impaired when it comes to having interpersonal relations. All personality disorders have continual difficulties with interpersonal relations. Some clients can have maladaptive behaviors but don't get the diagnosis. You can have traits of a personality disorder without having a personality disorder. The most important thing when we look at this is the inflexibleness. They cannot adjust. So just like when we talked about mental illness, not being able to adjust, not being able to, flex their coping skills around, this personality is inflexible. Dual diagnosis. You see a lot of dual diagnosis in mental health in general. Dual diagnosis is addiction and a mental illness. The slide says substance abuse. Don't box yourself into thinking about substance abuse, okay? They can have sexual abuse, right? They can have a porn addiction. They can have a gambling addiction. There could be a food addiction. So we have to be aware of the clients with multiple problems that are involved in dual diagnosis. I mean, specifically when we go into substance abuse, most of my clients when I worked in addiction medicine, most of them also had another psychiatric illness, bipolar, schizophrenia, schizotypal, borderline, right? So dual diagnosis is both addiction of some type and a mental illness. So personality disorders, when we look in the DSM-5, there's 10 separate classifications. They're classified into different clusters. So cluster A are your odd thinking, eccentric behaviors, paranoid, schizoid, schizotypal. Cluster B are your dramatic and erratic behaviors. These are the most exhausting to deal with. Going to be your antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. And cluster C, severe anxiety and fear. They're going to be your avoidant, dependent, and obsessive compulsive. There is a table 30.1 in the book that is good to check out. Right, so when we get into cluster A, this is that eccentric cluster. They find it difficult to relate to others and to socialize comfortably. First one, paranoid personality disorder. This one, super easy to remember. They are paranoid. They are jealous. They're controlling. They have social anxiety, unwillingness to forgive. This is a patient who's not going to want to take their meds because they're going to be afraid you're poisoning them. They're going to be afraid that everyone is just out to get them. 2 to 4% of the population, right? Prevalence 2 to 4%, more so in men than in women. A lot of social anxiety, frequent teasing because of their odd behaviors, poor relationships due to jealousy and controlling behaviors. They're not going to forgive, and they're going to project onto everyone else. They're going to be paranoid that their partner is always cheating on them. Schizoid, 5% of the population. That's a lot. Lifelong pattern of social withdrawal. Like restricted range of emotions. They're going to be bullied and picked on in school. You're going to see this in childhood. You're going to see this in adolescence. So remember, we don't diagnose till adulthood. They're going to be loners. They're going to be maybe do poorly in school. They're going to just be labeled as shy. They're going to avoid close relationships. They don't get approval or rejection from others. It's not going to have an effect on them. This is a 40-year-old virgin, right? Friendship, dating, any sexual experiences are rare. Numerous imaginary friends and fantasies. And employment is going to be difficult, right? Schizoid is your extreme, lock yourself in a bunker, you're not going near anyone, loner. They cannot have a job that involves any personal interaction. Schizotypal. A little bit less of the population. This is characterized by magical thinking, odd beliefs, inappropriate affect. More common in men than women. You see it in young people, especially those who have a family member with schizophrenia. Extreme anxiety in social situations. They tend to ramble. They're also very paranoid. Lesser degree than schizophrenia, but you also see hallucinations and delusions with this population. Major difference between schizophrenia and schizotypal are going to be that individuals with schizotypal, you can kind of make them aware of that magical thinking. These are individuals that are going to join a cult because they are going to believe all of it. They're going to believe, right, UFO-aters. They're going to believe that the UFO is there. They're going to drink the Kool-Aid, and the Kool-Aid is going to allow us to leave our bodies and go to the spaceship, right? That Heaven's Gate cult. Ideas of reference. We haven't really talked about that. It's on here. Ideas of reference is similar to that magical thinking. You can see it both ways. Your book describes it fairly well, but ideas of reference and magical thinking go hand in hand. It's very much that step on the mother's crack and you break your mother's back. So you're going to be walking down the street, you're going to step on a crack, and then your mother accidentally has an accident and breaks her back. That's that ideas of reference and magical thinking. Ordinary events throughout your day happen, but you give them more significance than they should have. Right? Me stepping on a crack is not going to break my mother's back. I can link to these videos. I think they're in because I know they're not in your PowerPoints. They're very long and boring. Erratic cluster. This is at cluster B. These are your antisocial, borderline, histrionic, and narcissistic. These are absolutely exhausting to deal with, right? These are your serial killers. These are the people, narcissists, I mean, we all know what those are. Where you have to remember what some of these is, we have to think about what the psychiatric what the psychiatric definition is versus what society thinks of that word. So histrionic. These are attention seeking. When we did those questions in class the other day, this is the person that got a paper cut in their finger and lost their mind, yelling and screaming, call 911, I'm dying. My sister, when she got that 10th degree burn, histrionic personality. She does not have it, but you see the traits. Bold behaviors, right? Soap opera stars, Dolly Parton, lots of makeup, can be very provocative. Excessive emotions can be smothering. No insight into the disorder or their job in ruining relationships. So they have relationships and they might jump from one to another, but they're very superficial. And oftentimes the relationships don't last because the partner feels smothered because it's all about this person. 2% of population more often diagnosed in women than in men. You see symptoms in early adulthood. And then it kind of just grows. You can't set limits. They will try to manipulate. They will wine and dine you. They will say that you came on to them. So these are drama queens. They're excitable. They're dramatic. They have to be the center of attention. Narcissists. I am sure everyone can think of a narcissist. Feelings of entitlement, exaggerated self-employment, or exaggerated self-importance, right? They believe that they are the best, right? There is no one grandiosity. No one can top them. But they have weak self-esteem and they're hypersensitive to criticism. So if you criticize them, they're going to turn back around and latch onto you like nothing. More common in males than females. Age of onset is difficult to determine because you also often see traits in adolescence, right? So there's an unrealistic sense of talent, importance, beauty, children whose parents tend to put them at a higher risk, right? You're going to put someone in a beauty pageant. This is that Pageant Moms show, right? You're going to put your kid in the pageant. Your kid is going to grow up because you're telling them they're amazing, thinking they are just amazing. The same thing. You make little Tommy go into every soccer game because he's so awesome, but maybe he's really not that good at it, but because of how you present it, this kid just thinks I'm the best. Less functional impairment than other personality disorders. They can do okay in the world. I've always been taught to think like judges and like political figures as narcissists is kind of just a little, admit we never diagnose people, but good to think about. Antisocial. Antisocial personality disorders are not loners. They are serial killers. That is a big one that people get wrong when we think about it because you think, you're calling your friend antisocial because they don't want to go out. But antisocial personality disorder are serial killers. Lack of empathy, right? Ted Bundy, he was charming to get what he wanted out of the situation. Deceitful, manipulative, charming, all for personal gain, right? Beautiful women would come and help Ted Bundy and then he'd kill them. Didn't bat an eye to killing people. They were as impulsive, would take no responsibility. Criminal misconduct and substance use is high in this population. They are deceitful. They are manipulative. They are hostile if you try to stop them. Risk-taking, disregard for responsibility, right? They're just going to do what they want to do. And they are going to do it and lie and cheat and steal and kill for their personal gain. Disregard for the rights of other people. They do not care about your rights. It's all about them. This is reserved for adults only, but you do see symptoms in mid-teens. By late teens to mid-20s, that's where you see the biggest symptoms. And honestly, in some people, it can improve as they get older. Criminal misconduct, substance use is big. They won't come to treatment willingly. If they're in treatment at all, it might be court ordered, or it's going to be like an ASH. Like it's going to be in a forensic type unit where they're there because they killed people. And they're going to have a lack of empathy. They're going to be callous, right? It's not going to work. So with these patients, especially on the units, hit a button. With the antisocial patients, especially on the units, you need to, right, we're going to talk about with this every patient, set limits. And we're going to have to make sure that we're safe because they are going to try to sweet talk you into everything for their personal gain. Borderline personality disorder. These patients, honestly, in my opinion, are the ones you're going to see more likely on a psych unit because there's a severe impairments in function. Marked instability of emotional control and impulsivity, along with unstable mood and unstable relationships, makes them at a high risk for self-harm. They're going to cut themselves. They're going to burn themselves. They're going to punch themselves. We worry about them because they accidentally kill themselves, right? They make the threats of suicide, attention seeking. This is my boyfriend broke up with me. If I cut my wrist, he's going to come back. But you cut your wrist and you call your boyfriend and he doesn't come back and then you die. Splitting, inability to view positive and negative aspects as others as part of a whole. So splitting takes on two definitions, right? This one, they can't see black, or they can only see black and white. There is no gray in borderline personality disorder. It's a lot of you did something and it could be so minor and they just put you in the hate category and that's where you live. There is no coming back. It's very dramatic. The impulsivity, self-image distortions, emotional lability, the going back and forth between emotional extremes. Happy, sad, angry, frustrated. I mean, it just goes. Cuttings, promiscuous sexual behavior, numbing with substances. Substance use is high. It may also contribute to the unintentional death. Chronic suicide ideation. Chronic suicide ideation. These, you can't diagnose this till adulthood. I mean, but these are a lot of the patients where it's just always, you can't stop the suicidal ideation. Right, co-occurring mood, you often see that dual diagnosis, borderline personality and substance use, borderline personality and sex addiction. Ability and anger, physical violence, they're always the victim. These are, and I've worked with some of the older teens, the 17 and 18, where though we can't quite diagnose at 17, they're mad at the parents and say that their stepdad sexually abused them. And we would send them through forensic psychologists and all this stuff. And then they would be like, no, you misunderstood me, as they're getting removed from foster care. I didn't do it. See these patients with a chaperone. They will seek out treatment a lot for the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal ideation, and the self-harming behaviors. And you're going to see you will see this more often than not in treatment because of the repeat hospitalizations. You have to set limits and you have to treat comorbid condition. That's psychoanalytic, right? We go back to Freud, a lot of maternal dysfunction and bonding. If we want to get super advanced, you can actually see brain changes in these individuals. Especially in females and in males involving like the corpus callosum, but a lot of maternal dysfunction in that nature versus nurture, right? Something happened with the mother, something happened with the parents, that's psychoanalytic, and it impacts the infant from the developing. Personality disorders. I feel like we missed one. No, histrionic, narcissist, antisocial. Okay. Cluster C, avoidant. Low self-esteem, shyness that increases with age, inferiority, reluctance to engage with new people. They avoid interpersonal contact, right? These, again, are shy kids. They're not going to want to try out for soccer because they might get rejected. You see symptoms early on. You see the low self-esteem and the feelings of inferiority are a new one. This is going to be different than where we talked about, shy, no relationships before. Because they will have relationships. They will have a toxic relationship for years because they just cling to that relationship because of the fear of criticism and disapproval. They just don't want new relationships. So they will have the same best friend for decades and decades and decades. But when you try to bring someone new in, they just can't handle it. Right, this is a person that, when we talked about it, that narcissist. The narcissist who's going to always be putting someone down will find that avoidant. They're going to feel inferior. They're not going to want to engage with new people. So once they find someone and they're in that relationship with the narcissist, they will stay there forever. Low self-esteem, feelings of inferiority, they will take criticism. And that's one that's a little bit different than some of the other shy type ones. Dependent, submissive, fear of abandonment. And this is not in children, this is in adults. Right? If your spouse has to go to work and they're leaving the house, you get clingy, like you have to be cared for. You're terrified of being separated. Super low prevalence rate, like 0.5%. It could be chronic illness. It could be punishment. It could be a holdover from childhood. Just big fear of abandonment. They, again, are at high risk of abuse because they don't want you to leave them. So they're going to do what the person tells them to do. Right? Another person who that narcissist is going to prey on. Feelings of insecurity, lack of self-confidence, anything you say to them, they're going to believe. You are stupid and dumb. They'll be like, okay, I'm stupid and dumb. Intense anxiety when left alone, even for brief periods. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder. This is one that students mess up, and honestly, everyone confuses a lot. When you tell your friend who's super type A, they're OCD, you actually mean OCPD. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder is a perfectionist. This is a type A personality. To the extreme, stubbornness, indecisiveness, preoccupation with orderliness, and perfectionism. They always have to be in control. This is more common, surprisingly, in men, but it's one of the most prevalent at 2 to 8% of the population. You see it more often in older siblings than in middle or younger siblings. Background of harsh discipline. If you have a relative with the disorder, you're more likely to have it. High rates of depression, increase in suicide risk in people with depression because of all that anxiety they're putting on themselves to be perfect. They're going to rehearse over and over again how to respond in social situations, right? Goal seeking long after it's necessary, self-defeating, setting goals that are just, so ridiculous to meet. They're not going to complete projects. They're going to start projects, start crafts, and then never finish them because they're so anxious that it will not be perfect. Now, we are going to talk about next week obsessive compulsive disorder. So, just remember, obsessive compulsive personality disorder is a perfectionist. Okay, therapeutic interventions, treatment and therapy. It's going to be based on what the problem is. What is the client's complaint? Why are they at your treatment center? Why are they in your clinic? Psychodynamic therapy, cognitive behavioral group therapy, family therapy, psychotherapy is going to be it. Dialectical behavior therapy isn't on here, but that's like gold standard nowadays for your borderline personality disorder. Cure is not the goal. We cannot fix a personality disorder. However, what we are trying to do is symptom management, promote therapeutic communication, have great care when administering medications to personality disorders. If it's an outpatient patient, we want to make sure, right, those tricyclic antidepressants, you give them a 90-day supply, they can go and take it and kill themselves. Right? So we want to make sure we're giving them okay doses so that if they do try to commit suicide, it's not on the medications we're giving them. Assess every medicated client for a suicidal plan. Y'all, we assess suicide all the time. Medications. Biggest ones to think about are going to be your antidepressants and your antipsychotics. Antidepressants, because they do have anti-anxiety principles, right? So antidepressants, it's going to take 2 to 4 weeks to work. We are going to have to watch out, and we're going to talk about this in a few weeks. You haven't, I don't think, learned it yet, serotonin syndrome. We're going to look out for an increase in suicidality in the first 2 weeks after taking them. This is your Zoloft. This is your Lexapro. Antipsychotics. Y'all, antipsychotics and their side effects. Antipsychotics, right? 2 classes, second generation and first generation. First generation, your typical, that's your Haldol, your Thorazine. Your second generation, you're going to see your Geodon and your Zyprexa and your Quetiapine, also known as Seroquel. And you're going to see a lot of those extrapyramidal symptoms, a lot of the movement disorders, the dystonia, the akathisia, the Parkinsonism, neuroleptic malignant syndrome. And we're going to grow more and more on the antipsychotics throughout, but just make sure you're following. Anti-anxiety agents, we're going to use probably more so propranolol. We would not want to give a benzo to any of these patients because of the high risk of addiction. We don't really ever talk about anticonvulsants in this class. Anticonvulsants, your Lamictal, your Trileptal can work really well in some of these patients. And if you have kind of the thought of a mood disorder, bipolar, that's when you would use the lithium. Goal of the clients for personality disorder: identify and become responsible for their behavior, develop interpersonal relationships, and everything needs to be specific, right? So when we look at these box 3.3 is going to look at some of the goals. They have to be individual. The biggest thing when we talk about, and I don't know why it's not on here, with these patients is limit setting. That's going to be the biggest thing we do in the unit. We kind of had some of those questions when we did it in class yesterday, 2 days ago. We want to set limits on these patients. These patients, when we tell them, no, phone time is over, phone time is over. This is why psych units are so structured, and we need to watch out for that. Just making sure we're setting the limits to help the patient. So that covers personality disorders. I will get this posted for y'all. If you have any questions, let me know. Reach out, send me a message, send me a Canvas, email, whatever, and we'll get it covered. I will see you in class next Monday where we're going to cover anxiety disorders. Have a good day, y'all.